Hello, networkers, and welcome back to another episode of Ask the Network Engineer. My name is Michael Tomatis, and I will answer one of your questions. And this question comes from Daryl Jackson, and he asked, in your last video, actually one of the first videos in this series that I actually did, you spoke about the small size of the networking community. Why do you think the networking community is so small, and why is it so hard to get into networking? I'll be starting college again, and I'm surprised to see that most or all computer science degrees at a 2-year community college are all programming based. Or they have a general applied science degree in computer networking, which is a non-transferable degree to a 4-year college. Unlike the 2-year applied science degree in computer science, which is transferable. I love networking, but I hate that most companies that really need networking engineers or security engineers seem to think of those two areas as low-hanging fruit. Ouch. Is this because the subject matter is too hard to understand for the management and budgeting community? Great question. And there's many questions in there. So let me break this up one by one and let's talk more about that. The first question asked was, why do I think that the networking community is so small? And the reason that I say that is most companies, they don't require to have many network engineers to manage a network. For example, I used to work for a bank a long time ago, and they had about 1,000 users with about 30 locations. And they had about maybe 100 servers, give or take. And of course, hundreds of networking devices, right? All of these locations, they have routers, and some of them are redundant routers, and they have their own core switches and access switches in these 30 locations. At our headquarters location, we had a data center, we had an IDF and MDF with lots of access switches plugging into a distribution layer and distribution plugging in to a core and with server farm switches. So we had hundreds of networking devices, but we only had 2 network engineers manage that network infrastructure. It was myself and actually a good friend of mine. That's actually what we had. Technically speaking, we only needed 1 network engineer, but you got to have redundancy, because if not, I can't go on vacation. I might get sick. These things could happen. So we must have at least 2 people. And basically that was more than enough to manage the network, doing troubleshooting performance issues, and other type of tasks that we actually had. Where the server administration team, which managed only 100 servers, there were 20 of them, 20 system engineers managing over 100 plus or minus servers. So that is one particular example of that. Furthermore, when I did work for the Department of Energy, specifically their location in Livermore, I was responsible for the architecture of the backbone of that network. And their campus had roughly about 10,000 users, hundreds of buildings. So I was responsible for the actual backbone itself, me and my team. Now, it was 5 of us that managed all of that. Doing upgrades, doing maintenance to it, doing new configuration with new VRF designs, multicast, QoS, IPv6, things of that kind of nature that we did on the backbone of the network. And of course, there were, hundreds of devices there as well, different distribution aggregation points that we took care of. But there was 5 of us that took care of that. Now, there were hundreds and hundreds of servers that existed in this environment, and those were managed by 25, 30 plus system engineers. And for the desktop technicians, there were even more of them that managed the users. Most of them were help desk people that answered phone calls, but there were a lot of technicians that were specifically there in these buildings to help out with desktop issues. So once again, the number of network engineers was very minimal for what was required to manage the backbone network. And the reason for that is because of the workload. It's not that much that you have to do compared to a server. Server administrators, they deal with a lot of work stuff. They work on permissions or things not working or connection problems. Because with users, well, their desktops, they're connecting to some type of server for email, for web, or some type of application. So there's always something that isn't working between a user component and a server component. So a server administrator would tend to work a lot more hours, have a higher workload compared to a network engineer. Network engineers are basically people in the background. We just build the infrastructure that allows this computer to talk to this computer or the server. That's all we do. That the user component is not connecting directly into a network component to provide a service. It doesn't really do that. Now, if you're doing voice over IP, well, that's different. Because now you have a user endpoint, which is like an IP phone connecting to a voice cluster, Cisco UCM or some other phone system that a network engineer could manage. Okay, now your workload is definitely increasing. There's changes with extensions, changing phones, other type of user-based troubleshooting that usually comes with that territory. But for networking itself, once you put everything in place, do some routing, do some switching, that's pretty much it. Yes, you may change ports to different VLANs. Yes, you're troubleshooting performance issues like, oh, this is slow. So you're troubleshooting that. But the workload compared to what a desktop technician does or what a server administrator does is drastically different. It is a lot lower, even for larger size environments. Your second question was talking about college and where networking fits into that equation. So I'm going to be honest, and I'm not sure if I said this before, but if not, here it is. Companies in the real world today, certifications gets more attention. It is seen as more valuable than any college degree. And I personally learned about that early on when I was going through the interview process at Cisco. I mean, this is the largest networking company in the world. And when I interviewed for that company, for Cisco, I was about to graduate. About 2 months away, I was about to graduate. And the only experience that I had in IT was computers and with servers. I had no networking experience. But I was very excited. I was proud. I was about to graduate from college with a 4-year technical degree. I went to San Jose State University. And during the interview process at Cisco, they didn't seem to care. They kind of said, oh, that's nice. They said that's nice. They were more interested in my computer and my server experience. This is Cisco, the largest networking company in the world. And their response was they were more interested in that type of experience. Not much with my degree. And this is even with the management team, the Cisco TAC engineers. So that kind of took me off a little bit. I was like, wow, I thought Cisco would find that very credible, like very awesome. I never got that vibe. And even when I was at Cisco, it wasn't about going to college, getting degrees. It was about getting certifications. Okay, maybe it's the culture of Cisco. That's what I thought. But when I interviewed for other companies, they were only interested in my experience and my certifications, especially if it was a CCIE certification. They gave very little interest or value or attention that I had a 4-year college degree, a bachelor's in science. So that's what I learned early on, and it continues in every company that I worked for or do consulting for. However, there is some considerations to keep in mind where getting a college degree is very important. And that is if you're working for places like the government or a university or any kind of institution that is managed by a university. And that's what happened when I worked for the Department of Energy at the location in Livermore. They were very, very persistent and found value in the degree that you have, even which school you went to. So if you went to a state school compared to like Berkeley, it's treated differently. And with that, They did that more because of the ranking process, like they rank people and that helps them with salary choices. So I remember that process of being hired into that particular environment. I had to give them transcripts. I had to talk to the different directors about what these classes were. And they all knew it was bogus because my job would never be based on this. I was really brought in and hired because I had my CCIE, but this was the requirement for the actual institution, that they wanted to get more of a background of my college degree, and that would reflect what my salary would be. So that was also important. Okay, before I continue, I want to make something very clear so there's no misinterpretation of what I'm recommending. College is very valuable. Regardless of what companies may think, college does have its merits. So if you're thinking of, okay, so I should not go to college or I should just drop out, don't do that at all, okay? Continue on the course of getting your college degree. It has many valuable assets. And one of them, which is also important, is the particular life cycle of what people typically do. So most people starting out, we always do desktop computers. That makes sense. That is our first interface with IT. Then from there, you will either work on computers, but become more specialized and more of a senior in that field. But most typically leave and be more specialized. So they may do networking or security or database, that sort of thing. And from there, that's where you will start out as being a junior network engineer. Then from there, with years of experience, then you will become a intermediate, a mid-level network engineer. So now you get to a crossroad. And the crossroad is you have two paths that you can actually go towards. One path is continuing with networking, but pursuing the senior network engineering path. Okay? Now that requires a lot of certifications. So if you want to be a senior network engineer, then that means you are serious about the career for this path. And that means getting the CCIE or the CCDE is really very, very important. Then the second path is management. Now, most people have to make that decision within 2, 3, 4 years. Do you want to go into a senior position as an engineer or into management? And if you want to go into management, college is very important and very valuable. That was something that was communicated to me several times, that if I want to get into management, I have to look at getting management business type degrees or a degree. That was very important. That would stand out. Because for management, yes, you'll be a manager, then a director, then likely a CIO or a CTO. That is that particular path if you want to get into management. And that requires a college degree. So that is something to definitely keep in mind. College is important. Don't think that is not. But just keep in mind that you can do college. But if you want to get into networking, you have to do the certifications along with the degree that you're pursuing. The other question that Daryl asked was about the difficulty of getting into networking. And really, is networking, learning that, is that very challenging? Is it very difficult to learn that material? And right off the bat, it is absolutely not difficult material. It is actually very simple. It's actually very logical if you stay focused and motivated of learning the material and taking it seriously. It is not hard at all. So if you put in the time, you get the right material and you learn it, you're dedicated to it, it is not hard. It's nothing like physics or anything like that. It's very, very logical stuff. The problem is that most people in the general public, including management, unless they have a computer background with many years of experience, they truly do not really know the basics of what network engineers do. It's actually a little bit of a common joke among network engineers, especially if you're a veteran, that we make jokes that, yeah, our manager doesn't know what we do for a living. That's actually out there, and it's kind of true. So I like to work with managers or directors that have an actual extensive computer background because they understand the position and where networking falls into play. And the main thing is management sees how the customer or the user is responding. So usually when a user is having a problem with their computer, great, you have a desktop technician. They come in and they solve the problem. Management can see that the user said, oh yes, this person was excellent. They helped me install something to get my printer working again. You can see that. There's a better response from that. Or something with the server. Okay, management can see that very clearly as well, that this server is providing email for the users to access. So if users can't access their email, great, we need to go to the email server. So then you go to the person who manages that and they fix it. Oh, great, that person saved the day. Okay, what about networking? Network engineers rarely interface with the user. It may happen maybe once every blue moon. The point is a very rare occurrence because network engineers, just like voice people in some cases, we are always behind the scenes. You never see us. We're like in this big tower and we just do magic and everything just works perfectly though. The user doesn't even know about us. They assume that whatever the server and the desktop people do, that they're doing that magic. And management sees, well, it's the same thing for them. They're not really seeing what we're actually are really doing here. They're not seeing that, well, if it wasn't for us as network engineers, then your users would not be able to access those servers to begin with, or access the internet, or to do anything, or to put you into business if you are an internet-based company. If we don't do what we do as network engineers for the routers, the switches, the firewalls, the infrastructure, the routing, the switching, none of that is possible. But those are really infrastructure components that is not user facing. Another aspect for why it's hard to get into networking is the qualification, the requirements have changed. So a lot of people, they pursue their CCNA, and that's a great first step. But many of these tests, even the CCIE, they're all traditional. They're focused on routers and switches. And a network is not based on only routers and switches. There is a lot of advanced protocols going on here. There are many different products at play here. Networks today are not 100% Cisco anymore. That has changed. Yes, Cisco is very good with routers and switches. I love Cisco routers and switches. But there is better, more superior firewalls out there that companies are using. And that's providing a lot of the intelligence right now. So you have to learn that. These are like the Palo Alto network firewalls, or my favorite, the FortiGate firewalls. There's Sonic walls for small business type environments. Yes, there's the Cisco ASA firewalls, but with FortiGate and Palo Alto networks, they are easily trumping any interest of people getting education for Cisco ASA firewalls. Then you got wireless. There are so many different options for wireless. Yes, you got Meraki, you got AeroHive, you got Ubiquity. That's one of my favorites as well. Even FortiGate has their own unified wireless solution as well, which is also very, very impressive. What else do we have? So the point is that there are many different products that you need to have exposure to. Not just routers and switches, but with the different type of next generation firewalls, different type of wireless products, different type of WAN optimization products, Riverbed, F5, Palo Alto Networks, Fortinet, you get the idea. That's really where the challenge is. I see these resumes here. Yes, they got their CCNA. They have a little bit of switch experience or router experience. But networks have VPN tunnels. They have complex firewall policies. They have particular security solutions that is authenticating based on a user's identity that is integrated with Active Directory. And these are things that I see what companies want. And that's really the basis of what the training content for RouteHub.net that we do. That we are providing all this type of training that people can utilize and to get this education to know how this stuff really works in a practical environment. Because the certifications are not teaching that. And that makes it hard for people to get into these environments because they're not just using routers and switches anymore. There's a lot more things at play here. Another component at play of why it's hard to get into networking is the company that you're in. It is sometimes very challenging to move up within a company and to become a network engineer. There's a lot of politics that goes on. And sometimes it may be impossible to get into a networking department in the company that you're working for. And this is something that I talked extensively about, to be prepared for, to understand the environment that you're working in. And what I talked about, and I'll say it again because it's very important. If your path is networking, you want to be a network engineer and you're working in a company doing desktop or servers or something else, and you want to eventually become a network engineer, and you're putting in the effort and you are getting your CCNA and you're showing proof of that to your management staff. What I always tell people is you need to have a conversation with your management, your manager, your supervisor, whoever it is, and talk to them. Tell them, look, I want to talk to you really about my goals and my career, because I like working for this company and I like to know how my career, my interest works in this environment. And I have interests of being a network engineer. I love networking. I like it for XYZ reasons. And I am making the efforts to do so, of getting certifications, getting my CCNA. I have my little lab at home. I'm learning things. I'm looking at the network diagram and documentation that we have, and I'm learning and configuring that in my own lab to give me that exposure. I know it's not real world experience, but this is the effort that I'm doing because I really have interest in networking, and I like to do that within this great company that I'm working for. My question to you is that something that is possible in this environment? How can I move into that department? Can I get your support? Those are the type of things that you should definitely talk to your manager about. Okay. And just having a very honest conversation with them. And that's going to tell you very quickly on what happens from that conversation. Your manager will either support you or they will not support you. Now, they won't tell you that they won't support you. It always is based on the action that happens. If they're showing support, then you're going to get a lot more of a response and more of a dialogue between you and your manager. But there are some cases where the manager is like, well, your job is desktop, so we just want you to do desktops. If they do not support you in that effort, or if it's difficult to move into the networking department, you need to leave that company. Simple as that. I've seen many great people who want to be a network engineer, and they talk to their managers, and the manager does nothing to facilitate or to support them on their decision of being a network engineer. And they're stuck doing desktops for 10 years. And they're like, well, I want to do networking, but I'm doing desktops here. I get it. It's very challenging to get into that kind of position. But the companies, it does matter. So that's why if you're interviewing for a new company, ask that question during the interview process. I did that all the time. I make it very clear what my ambitions is, that I have interests, early on in my career. I've always mentioned that I want to be a network engineer. This is the career path that I want to pursue. And I want to pursue within this great company. You gotta say great things about the company and the manager and the team that you're a part of. That you want to enrich and empower the company that you're working for. Okay, if you sit there and if you insult the company and what they're doing, they're not going to support you. You want to benefit the company, and having people that knows about the environment is a great asset. But moving into different departments, it is possible. I think I said this before in a different video, but I have a very good friend who works for good technology. He works mainly on desktops and servers, and he eventually is managing the entire network. And he's doing a lot of cool stuff. It is very, very possible to move into the networking department. It'll be a very gradual effect, of course. Okay? But it is very, very possible. It is based on the environment. So you have to do that assessment very quickly to see, will your management support you on your career endeavor of being a network engineer? Number two, is the network engineers in that department, are they open to that kind of situation? And of course, there's other examples of getting into networking and the challenges for making that particular transition, which I talked about in other videos, other episodes of As a Network Engineer. And some of those highlights were pursuing a high-end certification, CCIE, CCDE. Those are the opportunities that will get people pursuing you directly. So you got to consider that on your path of being a network engineer, being highly certified. Number two that I talked about as well earlier is you want to pursue a company that is network focused. This is companies like Cisco or an internet service provider, WAN provider, a cloud computing provider. These are companies that have a lot of networking responsibilities and will give you the best chance of getting exposure to real world networks and the possibility of moving up within those particular companies to become a full-fledged network engineer. But there's also based on location and vicinity. So if you live in a big city, you got a lot of great opportunities. So like San Francisco, Atlanta, New York, there is a ton of networking positions. If you live like in a very small type of city, it will be more challenging. So you got to kind of do your research on where you live today. What kind of networking opportunities exist in where you live? Okay, just look at job sites and just see what's out there. Because I see a lot of networking positions in a lot of these big cities. Dallas, San Francisco. San Francisco has a lot of networking positions. Oh my goodness. So it is based on where you live. If you live in a small town or a small city, it's going to be more challenging. So keep those factors in mind. And we are finished. So Daryl, thank you very much for the question. This is your second question. I appreciate that very, very much. And I feel your frustration. I'm sensing that you love networking, but it seems like it is mission impossible to truly get into a network engineering position. It's a very common core of a question that I see many of you asking about, of getting into the networking field and how can that become a reality. So again, use the particular bullet points that I talked about in this episode and the other videos for this series. Definitely take that to heart and to do that. Okay, continue doing your college. Okay, that is very important. It has its merits. So continue to do that, but also continue your path of getting certifications. That's also very important and valuable from what companies are looking for. Look at jobs that are in your area. What kind of jobs are typically in your area? If it's not, you may have to make other decisions of maybe moving. Now that's your choice. You got to kind of do your research to see what is possible. But where you live has a big impact on what your choices are. So for me, I lived in San Jose for like 8 years. There were a whole bunch of opportunities down there in San Jose. So where you live has a significant impact on your decision of how you will become a network engineer. Just keep that in mind. So again, thank you very much. If there's something specifically I did not answer, I apologize, and just post your question below. I want to make sure I answer and provide as much guidance as I can, because I do appreciate the questions and the support. So once again, I want to hear from you guys. Post your questions below in the comments for anything in the networking field or being a network engineer or something that you want me to elaborate more in this video. No problem. Post your questions below and I will talk about that in a future video. So thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel. That would mean a lot. And I will see you guys next time. And happy holidays, by the way.